this could be us.
So back to what I was saying.
Could be us.
Hey man, it's Car Reacts, and today we gonna be reacting to 3 ice cream truck horror stories. I ain't gonna say too much, cause I already know y'all just wanna get in the video, so we just gonna get right into the video. So let's go.
I drove an ice cream truck for a couple of years. I am the kind of person who never stopped at one place or at one job. I kind of did everything I could to earn money to travel the world. After a part-time job at a local restaurant, I was getting bored in a small town. I was planning to go out and get on the roads. I had this one friend from school who told me she has got a permanent job as a chef in California. I remember she had an ice cream truck, so without wasting any more time, I asked her if I could rent that from her to make some money. I won't lie, she not only gave me the truck forever, but didn't even take a single penny from me. So, with an entrepreneurial attitude, I started my mini business. I had no idea that I always had a knack for the food business. I started to travel in that truck and sell ice cream for a living in the entire Oklahoma area. I renovated the truck with my hard-earned savings and started a new chapter in my life. I generally stopped near playgrounds and schools in the evenings. The fun part of the job was to see kids chattering around me with excitement and laughter. After a month, I became familiar with the kids. I remember every little face to whom I sold ice cream. It was a warm summer afternoon, also a holiday. Expecting the children to come early to the park, I started driving the truck to the location. When I reached the park, I saw children have started to arrive. I pulled the truck under a tree near the sidewalks and rang the bell attached to the truck. They all gathered around the truck and started asking for their favorites while raising $1 with their tiny hands. It was like feeding 1,000 tadpoles in a small pond. I was busy distributing the ice cream when my eyes went to a little boy sitting at some distance. He was sitting on a green bench while keeping his head down. It seemed really odd that amidst all these active kids, the boy was on his own like this. Almost every kid in the park took ice cream from me, but that boy didn't even turn around once towards the truck. I thought, maybe he has no money. So I decided to give that kid a chocolate cone for free. I turned around and prepared the cone for him, but when I looked back, he was gone. The empty bench lied there. I got a bit sad and started to clean the truck before moving on to another spot. I was cleaning the floor of the truck when I heard a small knock on the order desk. I turned around and saw that it was that little boy who was sitting on that bench a few minutes back. He was standing near the truck, but his head was still down. Sun was about to set, so the area under the tree...
This is Filmora 9, the easy-to-use drag-and-drop track screen recording social sharing video editor.
No shit.
Got a bit darker than usual. I couldn't see his face at all. I asked in a cheerful voice, "Did you want an ice cream?" Without moving up his head, he raised his small hands toward me and said,
"A strawberry cone, please."
His fingers were dirty and there were mud under his nails. It seemed like he dug the ground with his small hands just a few moments back. I gave him the strawberry cone, but refused to take the money. But he didn't move away. He just stood there like before, holding the $1 on his muddy hand as it dangled in the air. The kid's body language felt very weird to me. I have never seen such a calm and extremely quiet kid like him till now. I took the money and the kid took his strawberry cone and turned around to walk away. "Hey, what is your name?" He stopped and without turning around replied,
"Mom told me never to talk to strangers. I have to go home. She's waiting for me."
He then walked away. I got a bit surprised seeing this kid's obedience towards his mother. Such a well-behaved kid, I thought to myself. That night, after coming home, I still couldn't stop thinking about that child's unexpected behavior. I decided to go to the same park tomorrow and talk to that kid more. The next day, I went there again. As I went on selling ice cream, my eyes kept scanning the park for that little boy the entire time. At a point, when I realized he won't come today, I started to pack up for the day. I was putting the ice cream tubs inside the mini fridge when I almost gasped in fear. A small dirty hand was resting on the desk of the truck. It didn't take me a second to realize whose hand was that. "Jeez, you scared me," I said in a relieved voice. The boy stood like before, holding a dirty $1 in his hand while keeping his head down. I said, "Now, We are not strangers anymore. You can tell me your name, he said in the same emotionless voice.
I'm Mikhail.
Well, hello, Mikhail. Do you come here alone? He nodded his head slowly from up to down. I handed him his strawberry ice cream. As I went to take the dollar from his hand, my fingers ran over his index finger, and his dirty nail came off, revealing the red flesh underneath. Oh God, you are hurt. You need help, I said, seeing this vicious sight. But without saying anything, the boy turned around and started to walk away. It seemed like he didn't even feel the pain when the nail came off. Drops of blood laid on the desk, and I watched the boy walk away as if nothing happened. I couldn't hold my curiosity anymore. As soon as he went behind that tree, I came down and started to follow him. The boy was walking towards the left corner of the park that was now in complete darkness. This side was also covered with vines and weeds. I had no intention of scaring the child, so I maintained my distance and watched him secretly. After walking to a big tree at the end of the park, he stopped under it. The small lamp on the other side of the road gave me some light to that corner. The boy crouched down on the road and started digging up the soil with his small hands. He dug without stopping. His nails and fingers cut open with the pressure. Raw flesh and blood came out of his wounds as he went on. But I still couldn't see his face. I was thinking to stop this child from hurting himself like this when the boy placed the ice cream in the pit he just dug up and buried it with soil again. I couldn't watch anymore, so I came out from the bushes screaming. What are you doing? Are you all right? For the first time, the boy lifted up his face towards me. On that warm summer evening, I felt the gush of cold wind shivering down my spine. The kid had no eyes. Instead of his eyeballs, dark hollow eye sockets stared at me. A painful expression appeared on his face and he said,
I want to go home, but no matter how much I dig to come out, I always end up here.
And vanished in the air, right in front of my eyes. I fell to the floor with a huge shock. My mouth opened in shock and my heart stopped in fear. Sweat appeared on my forehead as I tried to make out what just happened a few seconds earlier. I can't explain how I picked myself up that day and returned home. The next day, when I went to that park, I saw cops near the park and it was sealed like a crime scene. A small crowd gathered on the sidewalk and watched this entire situation. Out of confusion, I asked the man standing in the crowd, "What's going on here?" He said in a restless voice, "They have traced a missing kid from last month. It seemed like someone abducted this kid for ransom and later murdered him. An old woman came to jog in the morning when her dog dug up that ground under the tree. That's when she saw a small hand lurking beneath the soil. Look, there he is." I followed the man's eyes and saw the paramedic taking away a corpse of a small child dressed exactly like that little boy. The corpse had no eyes, which supposedly got eaten by maggots. The body has been there for months, so its rotten smell made the air heavy. Everyone covered their nose, and some even walked away to avoid vomiting. It came to know that the boy's babysitter brought him to the park and later abducted him, asking for ransom from his parents. When they threatened her, saying she will never get away with this, the cruel woman strangled the boy and buried his body under that tree. The most shocking part was the kid was alive when she buried him. He fainted with the trauma and pressure on his neck, but when he regained consciousness, he found himself buried under the ground. He tried to come out while digging the soil but choked to death during that struggle. His nails were all broken as he suffered silently. Now I actually understand what that kid meant when he said, "I want to go home, but no matter how much I dig to come out, I always end up here." The poor kid's soul was trapped here for a month, and all he wanted was to go home. I hope this kid is finally resting in peace. And to that babysitter, may she rot in jail for her entire life.
But this kid,
Hey guys, I see many of you commenting on my videos that this channel deserves 1 million subscribers. But I also see the percent of people who watch my videos aren't actually subscribed to the channel. So, if you like the content, want to support my channel, and want to see this channel reach 1 million subscribers, or maybe 500,000 subscribers, then go ahead, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. It's free, and you can always change your mind later.
It happened when I was 13. I was in the 8th grade at the time. I remember the time well, as a lot of kids had been going missing from our neighborhood. I remember the first child to go missing. His name was Matthew Smith, and he was our neighbor's son. It gave me a lot of trauma going to school the next day and not seeing one of my classmates. The weird activities had also put our town in fear, as the cops had no idea where the kids were or who was taking them. But amidst the horror of it all, there was a ray of hope that appeared as a shining light for us kids. And that ray of hope was Mr. Williams' ice cream truck. Mr. Williams was a man who regularly sold ice cream to our neighborhood. Every time I came back home from school, his ice cream truck would always be packed with kids. And while I believed he was a good man, most things about Mr. Williams was odd. First of all, he didn't drive a normal ice cream truck, as the vehicle he drove looked more like an RV than a truck, as it was much bigger than regular ice cream trucks. Secondly, he always had this weird ecstatic look on his face every time he saw children. As I remember the first time I met him, and he looked at me with wanting eyes like I was a treat. Finally, last weird thing about Mr. Williams was the distinct taste of his ice cream. It's really hard to explain, but you know how vanilla ice cream tastes the same regardless of which store you buy it from? Well, no other ice cream tasted like the one made by Mr. Williams, as whatever ingredients he used gave his own ice cream its own unique taste. And it was still sweet at the same time. I don't know what was in it, but I always craved the distinct taste of his particular ice cream. And I knew I wasn't alone, as every other kid always wanted it too. Visiting his truck soon became a tradition for me, till a weird occurrence that happened one afternoon. I had just come back from school, and as usual, I went to get some ice cream at Mr. Williams' truck. It was pretty crowded, as other kids were rushing to get theirs, so I decided to wait out the frenzy by going to the back of the truck. As I stood there waiting, I began to hear muffled noises coming from the back of the truck. I got curious, so I started to walk towards the truck so that I could try to make out what the noises were. I reached the door and I was about to place my ear on the door. I heard a loud, guttury scream come from the truck. The scream startled me, so I immediately arched back and fell on the floor. I was confused and scared at the same time as I began to ask myself, why was there a scream coming from the inside of an ice cream truck? At first I thought Mr. Williams was in trouble, but as I began to think more deeply, I realized that the high-pitched scream belonged to a child. Numerous thoughts started running through my head as I sat down there, too scared to move. Eventually, everything became quiet as the scream.
This is Blankos, the free-to-play multiplayer game where you can unlock, earn, and sell NFTs in-game. In Blankos,
Screams of the excited kids rushing for ice cream had died down. As I got up to move, that's when the back of the ice cream truck opened up and Mr. Williams walked out. As he saw me sitting down on the floor, he looked at me with concerned eyes and said, "Tracy, isn't it?" I was still scared, so I didn't answer. He then continued with, "What happened to you? Did you fall down? You look pale, as if you've seen a ghost." I still didn't answer, but I just did the first thing that popped into my mind, and I bolted. I ran all the way to my house and I locked the door behind me. That night, I went to bed with only one question on my mind. Who was the child who screamed in the back of Mr. Williams' truck? Throughout the following week, I avoided Mr. Williams' truck, as I was still a bit scared due to the incident. With every passing day, I delved deeper into my thoughts as I felt my curiosity eating at me. The next day, when I came back from school, I quietly slipped out of the house and I made my way to Mr. Williams' van. As usual, it was really crowded and busy, so amidst all the rowdiness, I found my way to the back of the truck. The doors were closed. I stood there for about 30 minutes with my thoughts, and I eventually gave up. I didn't hear anything, so I turned my back to leave. And that's when Mr. Williams emerged from the back of the truck. He was taking out what seemed to be trash, and as he walked down the streets to where our garbage cans were situated, I noticed the door was slightly left ajar. I knew I had heard nothing while I was waiting, but something told me to take a peek inside just to clear all doubts. So I walked forward and I peeked into the van. It was pretty dark inside and I couldn't see anything, so I decided to get in and take a better look. So I walked in. The inside of the van looked like a small room, but I decided to take out my phone and use its torch to look around. At first, I was confused as to what I was seeing, as posters and pictures of little children were plastered all over the walls. There were notes all over the place, and everything seemed wrong about the scene. I began to walk forward when I felt something brush my leg. I looked down to see I had passed a slightly large dog cage. I was about to peer in to see if I was brushed by the paw of the dog, and that's when I saw a little human hand pressed against the cage. I was shocked, so I instinctively arched back. I knew I had seen a child's hand, but I had to make sure, so I summoned the courage and I peered in. That's when I saw a young, gagged child stuffed inside the cage. I held myself from screaming and I began to back away. It didn't take long before I bumped into something. I quickly turned around to see an extra 4 cages. Each of them held more gagged children inside. Before I could scream, the lights came on and I heard Mr. Williams' voice say, "I see you found my children, Tracy." I slowly turned around to see crazy-looking Mr. Williams smiling at me. Now that the room was properly lit, saw numerous cages with tired, injured little children who were all gagged and whimpering inside them. "What is this, Mr. Williams? So it's you who's taking all the kids away?" I blurted out. "Taking?" he asked. No. You see, Tracy, these kids came to me. I didn't take anyone." "Liar!" I screamed back. "It's obvious that you took them, but why? Why would you do such a thing?" I asked him in tears. "Why would I?" he shouted back at me, obviously frustrated. Why would life give the beautiful gift of children to everyone but me? I'd be a great father. I've always loved kids, but I can't have them. It hurt me deeply, but I wasn't going to bitch about it, so I decided to collect them, to take them by force. And as you can see, I have amassed quite the collection. He spoke like the children weren't living, breathing human beings. He spoke like they were memorabilia, and it was one of the most horrible and horrific things I had ever heard. When he was done speaking, a tense silence filled the van. I tried to move forward, but he blocked my way. I stuttered. Please let me go." And that's when he replied, "I'm afraid I can't let you do that. You see, I've had my eye on you for a while now, Tracy, and I think you'd make a great addition to my collection." And before I could reply to the morbid statement, he lunged at me. I instinctively threw my phone at him. It hit him in the eye and he began to scream. With no hesitation, I bolted and I ran all the way home. When I told my mom everything that happened, and she immediately called the cops. When the cops arrived, they couldn't find Mr. Williams. No one could, as he had completely vanished. The incident traumatized me for the rest of my childhood, but with a lot of therapy, I moved on. Although I always jump at the sound of an ice cream truck, as I know Mr. Williams is still out there collecting children and spreading his ice cream. I loved ice cream as a kid. I mean, what kid doesn't? I lived in a hot state too, so for kids in my town, hearing the ice cream truck jingle after a day hard at play was like seeing an oasis in the desert. My friends and I always made sure to have a tenner in our pockets in case the ice cream truck ever came around. We all recognized the ice cream man by his face with how often we saw him, and in return, he remembered all our names. Eventually, we learned his real name and started calling him by it instead of sir. His name was Harry, and he always looked a little worse for wear. He was balding, middle-aged, and almost certainly depressed if his unkempt, unshaven face was anything to go by. Still, he was nice to all the kids who came by his ice cream truck and made the effort to remember the usual orders of all his regulars. Every time I went up to him, he'd say, "Hey, Joe, another strawberry popsicle today?" I'd either reply, "Yeah, thanks, Harry," or tell him I wanted something else if I wasn't in the mood for it. I imagine he probably did the same with all his regulars, and not just the kids. The adults were all fond of him too. The merciless heat didn't spare them just because they were grown-ups, and most of them saw nothing wrong with indulging in a sweet treat every now and again. It wasn't uncommon to see a couple of grown adults leaning on the parked ice cream truck, making casual conversation with Harry with ice cream cones in their hands. We all already lived in a small town where everyone knew each other. But Harry and his ice cream was a fixture in the community.
Hey, what are you doing?
I'm making my video with the War 9.
What kind of YouTube videos do you make?
Makeup videos.
A fixture in the community that helped bring everyone together. I think Harry liked having things that way too. Unlike us kids, he was able to get more off his chest talking about his life with other grown-ups. I'd sometimes overhear my own parents chat about how rough Harry's life had been, and what a good man is to still be so kind regardless of the fact. I don't know the full details, but I'd heard enough about him from bits and pieces of conversations over time to know that he was divorced and that his son was in prison for some sort of violent crime. I tried not to think too much about it though. It wasn't like I could do much to help him anyways. I was just a kid, and as far as I was concerned, he was just a friendly local ice cream man who everybody liked and will always be there on a hot day to give us a cold treat. Those happy days wouldn't last though. I was walking home late after hanging out at a friend's place. Since everyone in the neighborhood knew each other, my parents didn't really have a problem with 10-year-old me walking the streets alone. It was a hot afternoon, and the path back home was long, so I was excited when I noticed Harry's ice cream truck coming up the road beside me. The fact that the ice cream jingle wasn't playing from the speakers like normal should have been a red flag. But at the time, all I could think about was, not much. I wanted a strawberry popsicle to beat the heat. I waved down the ice cream truck and waited for it to park. When it did, I rushed over to the side stall, expecting to see the town's favorite boomer. Instead, I was met with someone else entirely. He was a much younger man than Harry, who I'd never before seen in my life. And although he smiled as he greeted me, it lacked the friendly warmth I'd expect from the ice cream man I know. "Hey there, kiddo. What are you having?" "Strawberry popsicle, please," I told him. "One strawberry popsicle? Coming right up." The man disappeared into the truck for a moment before emerging with a wrapped red popsicle in his hand. I took it from his hand and noticed that the clear plastic packaging had become slightly torn. It wasn't an unusual sight. The plastic they used for these was as cheap as they came. What was odd was that I could see the popsicle had already partially melted, smearing the clear plastic with blobs of red. Whoever this new ice cream man was, he wasn't quite as thorough as Harry has been at his job. "This is $1.25, right?" I asked as I rummaged through my pocket with one hand while holding the still packaged popsicle in the other. The young man held up his hand. "No need to pay," he told me. "Consider it a gift from me to you." I started to like this guy a bit more after he said that. "Gee, thanks." Actually, his eyes darted left and right as if to see if there was anyone nearby. "How about I treat you to some more free ice cream in the truck?" "Why would you do that?" I asked, starting to get suspicious again. "See, I'm new here in town, and I want to get along well with the kids here. So why don't you come inside so we can have a little chat? I'd love to get to know more about this place." No thank you," I told him. "I actually have somewhere to be right now." "Oh, well that's a shame." The man was smiling, but I could see from his eyes that he was angry. "Take care then." He drove off and I continued my walk home while trying to enjoy my popsicle, which was hard to do with how odd it was. Most of it still tasted like strawberry, but there was also an underlying metallic tint to it that I couldn't quite place. In the end, I couldn't even bring myself to finish the whole thing in one go with how strange it was. When I got home, I put the weird half-eaten popsicle in my freezer to continue eating later and went about the rest of my day as normal. The next day, I went downstairs from my room to see the face of the new ice cream man plastered on the news. My parents were both watching it with watery eyes. I was only somewhat shocked to see him there, but I didn't realize why my parents were crying until I listened to the news myself. The young man had been caught by the police in the middle of trying to coax another kid in town into his ice cream truck. They ended up inspecting his ice cream truck for it and found something that left the whole town shaking. Inside the freezer was the bloody body of Harry. His throat had been slit open and he'd been crammed right alongside the ice cream he'd been selling. I realized with horror that the metallic taste I got from that strawberry popsicle the other day was Harry's blood trickling from his still fresh corpse onto the packaged ice cream being sold. The news went on to explain that the young man, Harry's murderer, was none other than Harry's own son. He owed money to someone very violent and was planning to sell his own father's organs on the dark web to pay for it. He was even willing to kidnap kids to sell to pedophiles of those dark recesses of the internet. And if not for my common sense, I could have very well been one of them. The whole town mourned the loss of their friend while his traitorous son rotted in prison. Hopefully, he'll stay there for the rest of his miserable life for what he did.
Alright, y'all. That's gonna be it for the day. Man, I should never choke on my spit, bro. But hey, that's gonna be it for the day. And y'all make sure y'all like and subscribe. And I'm out. Peace.